Introducing AI in the enterprise is more than an IT upgrade. It is a revolution and arguably one of the most important IT decisions that a company makes. That is why it requires more strategic planning and consideration than any other previous investments in computing, irrespective if we talk about moving to mobile or cloud computing. For corporate boards, this means that setting and approving AI strategy is the most important business decision they now have to make. When it comes to AI adoption in financial services, the Silicon Valley's moving fast and breaking things approach to development simply is not an acceptable strategy. In many ways, the time for experimenting in labs and small pilot projects is over. AI solutions are ready for the enterprise, and they bring with them rewards, which early adopters have already reaping, having moved from trials to large-scale adoption. Early adopters are confident that within the next couple of years, AI developments will deliver around 30% of their new revenues and cost savings. Their success also shows that they have successfully dealt with their legacy issues. Today, we have a superb lineup of talent and experience for this roundtable discussion. My guests will explore the opportunities and strategies which will enable companies to execute transforming legacy business with artificial intelligence. So I'd like to invite my guests to briefly introduce themselves. Nisanka, shall we start with you?
Hi, thanks, Clara. Good day, everybody. My name is Nisanka. I work from Sydney. I work for Commonwealth Bank in Australia. So my role is I held the portfolio lead for strategy for taking emerging technology and digital into our business. If you really say my job is more than 70% boring, sometimes 30% interesting. Somebody thinks, looks at my designation and say, you must be doing interesting things. It's not really the case. So we have a lot of battle scars trying to adopt AI into Commonwealth Bank and my previous bank, Westpac. So it will be an interesting discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Nisanka, for joining us from Sydney, Australia. Eric, shall we move to Singapore with you?
Yes. Thanks, Clara. Hi, my name is Eric, and I'm a senior lecturer in AI and data science in the National University of Singapore. So prior to joining NUS, I've been almost coming to about 15 to 16 years of experience in the financial sector and oil and gas. So my domain expertise is actually in finance, and my PhD is in the area of finance, and actually I do research in behavioral finance. So so it comes as a surprise to maybe some of you what I'm doing in AI now. Well, I think what I'm interested in this area is really firstly it's an area which I'm teaching now, AI, especially in the areas of natural language processing, which is an area of AI. And so when you go deeper into NLP, you realize that there will be things like social media and the news media, and these are all very really reflects how people behave and how it affects the financial markets. So this area of research which I do in AI and NLP and how it intersects with financial industry. Thanks, Clara. Over to you.
Fabulous. We're staying still in Singapore, and Bireshwar, can we join us and tell us a little bit about your background and your role?
Absolutely. Thanks, Clara. Hello, everyone. I'm Bireshwar. I lead analytics, client propositions, and digital initiatives for Standard Chartered's commercial banking division. We do this globally for 22 markets across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. As you said, I'm based out of Singapore. And I think the predominant focus of my role, so I've been working with the bank for almost 18 years now. And the primary focus of my role and my team's role is to literally translate our business strategy into digital and AI machine learning enabled solutions, which would help our frontline teams do their jobs a lot better. And also, how do we come up with solutions that would help the clients with their day-to-day businesses? So it's a very strategic role in our organization, and with increasing amounts of investments and a very strong pivot towards client solutions. Thank you.
Fantastic. And finally, we're going to India. Sandeep.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sandeep, and I head innovation for DBS in India. So my role spans both the India business as well as the technology development center here we have in Hyderabad. So I'm speaking to you from Hyderabad. That's where I'm based. And we are part of the larger transformation team at DBS. And this also includes, apart from innovation, what we call data first, or the data-driven transformation agenda, which we have at DBS. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to hearing from all of you.
Fantastic. So we have, now you can see what I said, why I said earlier that we have a superb lineup of talent and experience on this panel. So I'd like to invite my guests today to address very briefly, in your experience, what is the main legacy challenge to address in the adoption of AI, especially post-pandemic? I know it's a broad question, but would you be able, from your different lenses and experiences and working within financial services, would you be able to give us a snapshot?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Clara. So let me just take few. I started working on AI initially for about 4 years ago. So especially we wanted to digitize the back office. So we saw the AI actually helping us to digitize back office in a different way. Typically, if you look at any mobile application, all the screen UI designs are based on hard logic. Okay, if I select this, this will do that. But in a back office, you never know what the customer really wants. And it was really hard and expensive to use a mobile app to really digitize back office because customers come up with a lot of different requests. So the biggest issue I always face, now I moved from there to Commonwealth Bank, and we started looking at customer engagement. And then I also started a pilot project on improving employee engagement using some AI tool. It's a startup called Attune from Japan. We started digital pilot. From all those experiences I really saw was the strategy was the biggest issue we really faced. Let me just explain a different way. When we started the pilot rollout in Westpac 3 years ago to automate the most common calls to be answered by a chatbot and a workflow, we couldn't scale up because it was replacing the humans and we didn't have a strategy and everybody was panicking. So we just didn't go anywhere. So we could not scale up. And when I came to CBA, I really saw a different perspective. In customer engagement, they had the strategy. So the AI was really getting the next best conversation was the thing. Then we moved on to financial well-being. One of the biggest issues we really saw was getting a different benefit because when you really, in banks, we have to really give the customer benefit, quantify it in dollars. What's your revenue increase? What's your cost reduction? If you couldn't do it well, you could not really take off with any AI adoptions. So we really saw when we went to financial well-being, we were not measured by that. And we are right now trialing with Bill Predictor, and one of my pet projects is called a Spend Predictor. It's really being taken up because it improves the financial well-being. I know Eric said he works in behavioral economics. We work very closely on behavioral economics. I really see from my point of view, strategy is a main challenge.
Well, thank you.
To you, Claire.
Thank you. Eric, what's your angle on this?
Thanks, Clara, for the question. I would decompose the question into two areas. One is the legacies, and one is the challenge. And I think legacy-wise, for the challenge in AI adoption, will continue to be still data. I think AI itself is an algorithm, and it's just a model to really to ingest the data. And as the saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. I think with any successful adoption of AI, you still need to have good data and relevant data, whether it's in terms of a granular, whether it's some cherry-picked data. In order to have successful adoption, in a very holistic sense, you need good data. Of course, the data in this case can differ for different organizations, whether it's for financial institutions or whether it's for customer feedback or or customer data. I think legacy-wise will be on data, and as for any form of new challenges in this case for the COVID-19, I think there'll be new form of in this case now COVID-19 is bring a new dimension to many businesses. For example, there's less face-to-face, and companies as well have gone to more digital, and a lot of the things are have become more chatbots, and then it's going the more adoptions of the video. And in this respect, my take is that the video in this case, which is really a form of data, which is both image and audio, will become more widespread. So a point in illustration, for last few months, what is the most successful application that's been downloaded? Can you make a guess? Well, it's actually TikTok. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it's TikTok. So TikTok, I think it's based out of China, but it's kind of a video-based app which has gone top the list. I think gone up to almost, like, if I recall the numbers, it's 500 million. And it's a video-based software, and I think it owns success partly due to at this point in time, COVID-19. Everyone's just wanting more engaged digitally, and video is one way that's make people more engaged. So in terms of the challenges, to sum up, we still be at data, getting good data, relevant data, and so we have more forms of data in this case coming in the form of video. That's my take. Thanks.
Thank you. Bireshwar, should we move across to you? So in your experience, what is the main legacy challenge to address in the adoption of AI, especially post-pandemic?
No, sure, Clara, thanks. I think my fellow panelists have touched upon some very valid points. A very different factor which comes to my mind is also a little bit cultural and organizational design driven. I think traditionally what we've seen, and again, it's probably true and resonates not just in the financial industry, but in the wider organizational context. You'll typically have different departments which will be competing for their share of the investment pie. And therefore, your investments get spread across several different initiatives, right? And while there are definite positives to that, because obviously what that does is innovation is more widespread in the organization, the lack of a holistic global or an organizational vision and an investment backing that will really impede development and deployment of solutions at scale. And I cannot overemphasize the importance of having everything aligned and stacked up in that sense, right? So when you're talking about, as Eric mentioned, you have to have invested in your data architecture. Your systems need to be aligned, synced up, and talking to each other so that there's constant flow of data, including feedback, which is getting churned. So I think that's one aspect. One thing which is very clear is, and I think I'm sure we've all seen the memes which are going around, that the thing that has probably accelerated digital transformation by a decade is the pandemic. And what that would do is, I think it would bring across a lot of organizational alignment in terms of accelerating the deployment of solutions that will really expand digital reach, optimize cost to serve, and essentially to drive efficiency. So I think that would be my take on that.
Thank you. Sandeep, we are moving to you now.
Yes, I think my fellow panelists have touched on most of the important points. It's really important, I think, for the main challenge with the legacy organization is data remains in silos. And if you don't have data which is accessible in a central point, and you're able to access it properly, it is a huge challenge. And I think a lot of work has to be done around re-architecting the systems to ensure that data is piped in and available as needed. And as Bireshwar said, I think the most important point, which is often overlooked, is the cultural and mindsets. So the whole advent of AI and ML brings in a lot of challenges. I think Nisanka mentioned about how the call center people were, afraid of AI taking over their jobs. So there's those considerations to be taken care of before, otherwise you'll have obstacles along the way. Also decision making, like people are used to making decisions on their experience, and they are now being asked to trust a machine or being asked to trust an AI algorithm might be more difficult. So those are things. So here at DBS, one of the reasons why I said that we are part of the transformation group and we have data first as part of the transformation group, we are addressing this in a systematic and a structured manner. So we have a number of programs within this to kind of not only teach people about data, understand why this is going to be the next big thing, allowing them to skill up, allowing them to experiment with these things. So for example, now we have a gamified learning solution for everybody across the bank, not just the tech people, but to learn ML based a gamified experience. So through a game you understand how machine learning works, and you're able to play a game and compete against others, etc. So democratizing AI and allowing it to be deployed at scale. Having said that, I think that because of the COVID-19 situation, another thing which is really accelerated is the journey to the cloud. So a lot of organizations, including financial institutions, are looking at how do we kind of move quicker to the cloud. So I think it'll accelerate that journey, which will again help as far as the AI and transformation journey of these legacy organizations are. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. I was just wondering, still staying with you for a few moments, would you be able to share with us a little bit of reflection or observations you may have had with regards to the adoption of AI and changes in the strategy of adopting AI in India during the pandemic? We would like to see how different countries perhaps are looking into this, and whether you as an industry practitioner have noticed different changes in how the pandemic has impacted adoption of AI.
So the most critical thing is now customers are being forced to go digital. They are, digital is being the first interface. So a lot of things around the contact center, the chat bots, the customer facing applications. AI plays a huge role there. So there's a lot of investment going into that part of it, not only on the front end, but also on the back end in terms of how you manage the distributed call center team now who's not in the office, who needs to schedule, things like that. The other major concern has been that of cybersecurity, because now with people working from home, logging in from remotely, the surface area of attack for hackers and malicious players is larger. So being able to invest a lot in terms of pattern recognition and understanding if there are some abnormalities, that's also been something that a lot of these companies or banks and financial institutions have been looking at very, very seriously. So I would say this is something which I see, let's say most immediate. Of course, there are other related things. For example, in branch operations, people are deploying solutions where they're able to, with image recognition, understand social distancing is taking place. People are wearing masks, etc., in branches. So there are those solutions also being tried out at various locations.
Thank you, Sandeep. Nisanga, earlier during our conversation, you mentioned a few projects you initiated. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about the business opportunities in transforming the legacy business with artificial intelligence, which you have noticed?
Yeah, I think, thanks, Clara. I think the business opportunities is we actually hit a wall in some of the areas when you digitize. So we were really seeing we were improving our mobile banking app, but the customer sales funnel, the conversions were not increasing, or we were not increasing the NPS. So there were a number of areas where we really had to think hard. How do we really hit the glass ceiling in improving the mobile apps and really getting it to the next level? That's when we really saw that it was really an accident, I think. So there were a number of guys who were really tinkering with some of the AI machine learning algorithms to predict the next best conversation for the customer on the mobile app. And all of a sudden, the people clicked and said, why not rather than we do a rule-based, let the machine decide based on the data, what the customer has been doing, what his accounts are there, his demographic profile, and all, etc. So what they realized is when they did a little pilot, we could see a lot more increase in the conversion for some of the customers. And all of a sudden, it was just a accident. So we started really taking data. It's a similar way to what happened in the pandemic. Our call center wait times went more than 1 hour. Then we were forced to really look at how do we really supplement this with technology, with chatbots. How do we really get the customers to talk to the chatbot on the mobile banking app, which customers never used, because we always kept saying, if you have any questions, call us. Now we are saying, no, if you have any questions, don't call us. Go to the app first, then call us, right? So it was a really funny story, right? Everybody, all the banks had to do it. And that's how the opportunity, I think the pandemic really changed. I think it brought up the strategy, which would have happened in 3 years for AI. I think brought about 2 to 3 years forward, because we all of a sudden had data. So that's when we really want to do the scaling part. So just to want to take a step back on, everybody talks about AI and data and everything. In my interpretation, my experience is, what does really AI do? I really think what AI does is it adds some kind of intelligence to the tech frame. So whatever we have the tech stack, it just adds some intelligence. Like what we say is, how do you take this next action? So this intelligence piece is the one that is really driving force behind it. So whenever I saw, I just want to give you another example. Has been working on a pilot for improving the employee engagement, which we are really trying to after the pandemic, because more than 85% of our people work from home. So I've been trying to push the pilot. Can we adopt it? But the issue is, because we don't have any strategy on really using AI insights. So the managers are really scared to really use the tool, because it actually shows their blind spots. So I'm really working on trying to get the HR team to have a strategy. How do we get the managers to adopt it? Because we have the technology, we are showing on the pilot, but people really say, no, we don't have a direction. So the opportunities are really known. I really see like improving NPS, reducing cost. But what is really stopping most of our banks and most of our organizations is really developing the strategy part to really scale up. So that's my...
Indeed. So strategy, we are talking about what would be the next strategic steps to consider when starting with the adoption of AI. To all of our clients, I recommend an AI strategy which is actually supporting the business strategy. So we always start with the business objectives in mind, and then we bring in technology to support those objectives. But it's very important to actually have a clear vision as to where do we start with AI. And I think, Bireshwar, can I move over back to you for this question? And in your experience, what would be the 3 main strategic steps to consider when starting with the adoption of AI?
No, thanks, Clara. It's something that resonates very deeply. And it's a very good question, simply because depending on which survey you look at, between 40 to 70% of most digital transformation initiatives ultimately do fail. And I think AI initiatives are no different. So I think the 3 broad pillars, and I think I'll just ride on what Nisanka was saying. I think the first thing really is that strategic vision as to why are you really embarking on a digital or a AI journey. You shouldn't be really starting off on an AI journey because it's cool, it's in vogue. All of your competitors are setting up innovation labs. So come on, let's join the race. We won't miss out, right? We see a lot of reactionary activity happening there. So I think in my mind, your AI journey cannot really be driven out of your innovation labs. It really has to be driven at the boardroom level. It really is an organizational imperative. And the second thing is, again, the other mistake which I've seen many people make is the focus is to simply automate an existing process that you have today. It's good, but again, if you're going to invest a lot of money, if you're really realigning your organizational priorities, that's not really what you're trying to solve for. I think the world is changing at an extremely fast pace. We already are in and increasingly will be in an extremely interconnected digital world. Our clients and their procurement, the logistics, all their journeys will be on platforms where data is being exchanged in a very constant manner. So we have to really understand what those ecosystems of the future look like, and how are you really gearing up your organization in an open architecture manner for that future. And again, just sticking to the strategic aspect, again, people really need to understand, and this needs to be driven organization-wide, that this is really not a nice to do. I think we're already at a stage where this is almost an existential aspect from a strategic perspective. Because if you don't do it, or if your organization doesn't do it, somebody else will. And it's a matter of time once those start kicking in that you lose your relevance. So strategic vision is the first pillar. I think, again, I don't think there's any disagreement on what the second aspect has to be. Once you've aligned your organization, you have to have your foundation solid, and that really starts with the technology. For true AI at scale, I think the tech strategy, the tech stacks, the pipes, the architecture, whatever you call it, really needs to be in place. AI really feeds off massive volumes of data, breakages, inaccuracies, latencies. These are all impediments. You can't, when we operate in a world where, as we discussed with Sandeep's example, data is sitting in different silos and people are pulling batch data, batch files and patching that up. That's really not how AI can happen, right? And you really need to plan for the cloud, leveraging cloud-based solutions, which will really generate insights and efficiencies at scale. Improve speed of deployment and optimize investment speed is absolutely an imperative. And again, if you just imagine how the clients would operate in the future, everything would be on a cloud-based platform. Increasingly, they already are, and we're going to see more of that anyways, right? And again, the reason cloud is important is also where will the newer, richer, more contextual sources of data come from? These will all be coming from the transactions that are happening in the ERPs of our clients. They will be actually happening from more from the publicly available sources of data, and getting that intelligently to accelerate your decision making, your processing is significantly faster is required. From a banking perspective, I think there are thousands of examples we can get into, whether it's underwriting, decision making, etc. But trade is so fundamental to almost all the businesses that we do. Even today, in many examples, when you're having trade, you're waiting for documents to be manually checked at each port before funding is released, which takes 2 or 3 days. You have digital things coming into the port. That should be, getting those speeds from your digital port should be good enough for you to start releasing funds, saving people 3 to 4 days each cycle. And those are just various things that will happen. And the third thing really is the mindset then. I think as bankers, more than others, we are very, very process driven. We would love to stitch everything up in a nicely defined process note and stick to that and have people literally audit you against that checklist. While your AI journey really is a constant journey of learning, unlearning and relearning, right? So you have to be in a constant cycle of building things, testing them and adopting them. More information sources will come in, more feedback will come in. Your decision-making paradigms will change, your models will change, how you deploy resources, capital will change. So just to sum up, I think strategic clarity, solid tech strategy and investment backing that, and an investment in the cultural journey to ensure that people understand and embrace what the future would look like and where all of this is headed.
Quite right, Birashar. Actually, I echo these 3 main considerations which you summarized in your answer. And actually, we run, I think it was about 4 months ago, we ran a survey and we asked most of our clients, primarily board director, we asked them what stops them from adopting AI in their organization. And well, all of them said, actually, we want to be better educated on what actually AI is. And I said, well, okay, that's why I wrote a book, and please do buy a copy. But very, very interestingly, actually, they said to us, even if when we understand, the more we understand what AI is, the more concerned we are around the importance of governance of this technology. At the board level, they have huge responsibility, not only to run the company, but also to ensure that they look at all type of risks. Adoption of AI brings a lot of business opportunities, as we've seen in our roundtable, but it brings a lot of risks as well. It redefines the risk management function in many ways. I always say that it's so important to train data scientists to better understand the challenges this technology will encounter when deployed in real life. And we have here on the panel with us a professor, someone who's training the minds, the future generation of computer scientists. Eric, in your experience as a scholar and professor, how do you think AI ethics considerations can be embedded in typical training for computer scientists? That will help address, I would imagine, a lot of governance considerations and concerns business executives have.
Yeah, thanks, Clara. I think I'll break down this question, AI ethics, into two components. One is on the framework itself. I mean, on ethics, the ethics framework. And another one will be on the science behind this, since we are talking about computer scientists. So first, on the framework. So when we talk about a framework for AI, we have to know that this framework will be very different across the different usage, different users. And I think when we talk about ethical framework, we do more to we deal with people. And of course, we know that in the financial industry, we either deal with customers or we deal with the markets, depending on whether you are institutional banking or retail banking. And I would think that in the ethical framework will matter more in the customer framework. For example, depending on your, as Sankar has mentioned, depending on the algorithm, your AI algorithm, should you issue a credit card to a particular customer and all that. So it's more customer related. And this needs to be done in like one of our panelists was saying, needs to be done at the organization level, a management board level. Should you issue the credit card to the customers and all that? And that is more of an executive overview in terms of framework, customer framework. And on the second part, on the financial risk management, I think there'll be less ethics involved, since every bank will definitely be motivated to manage their risk well, the trading risk well. So there's a framework part. It will differ across the different usage and be more related to customers. And I think, okay, moving on to the second part of the question on the training, on AI algorithms on the training. I think in this case, we have to recognize that a lot of the new technologies for AI ethics is an afterthought. What do you mean by the afterthought? I mean, most of the time you do a training the AI model, and then as an afterthought you look at things in particular two main things. One is the bias, and one is the explainability of the AI model. As we all know, AI models are really very black box, especially those are more complicated models. And sometimes you do not know what is actually trying to do. So, and that's where the explanatory part comes in. You have to know why is the AI model making decisions, in this case, has an afterthought, and how does it treat customers, different segments of the customers, fairly or unfairly, whether there's accountability or transparency. That's where the explanatory comes in. And of course, they inherently, so the AI algorithms, you can shift the bias, adjust the bias, and when we talk about bias in this case, it would translate to the AI, the training bias for the science part, and the bias in terms of the bias towards different types of customers. So you can adjust that, but then it goes back again to your executive. How should you adjust it? How should you adjust the models, to treat everyone, to treat the customers, your clients in a very ethical manner. So it comes together, both the framework, the management framework, and the AI science behind that. Yes, thanks, Clara.
I completely agree with you, and we had this discussion over and over again, how we adjust risk management frameworks, because obviously we are talking different, a more nuanced type of risk, different risks, which obviously some of this type of risks can create fundamental impacts on the health and well-being of an organization. So it's very important you articulated exactly the two main important considerations for looking at AI ethics. But as we are approaching I just had a quick look at the time. Sadly, we are approaching the end of our conversation today. I would like to invite each of you to give our audience one takeaway for them to note it down and take it away, put it on their desk and think about it, and use it to make their work in transforming legacy business with AI easier and perhaps more articulated in some cases. So one takeaway, what would be? Nisanka.
I think it's really getting the strategy right. Sorry, I'm keep saying that.
We're going back to strategy, and it's so important.
Yeah, it's a lot of battle scars on that. Yeah.
Eric, in your view, what would be one takeaway for the audience to remember from our conversation today?
I think I'll totally agree with Sankar that you have to get a strategy right, but I'll add further that you also have to get the science right. And the science and the strategy have to go hand in hand together. That's what I'd like to take away. Both the science and the strategy. Yeah.
Thank you. Bireshwar, what would be one takeaway from you?
Okay, I'll keep it short and dramatic. I think it's literally embrace AI or die. I think we've already seen more than half the organizations that were around, the Fortune 500 companies that were around in 2000 are no longer there. And we are going to experience the same level of disruption in the next 5, 10, or 15 years. You have to get it right, and you need to get started now.
Thank you very much. Sandeep, final thoughts from you.
Yeah, so echoing the other panelists' thoughts, AI is here to stay. What we must remember, it's an exponential technology, so it grows by leaps and bounds. It's not a linear curve. So the capacity and what AI could do even 2-3 years ago is radically different from what it can do now. It's so advanced. So it's good to remember that, and also the intersection of technologies like quantum AI and IoT. All of these things are going to really change the world. So I think we should be aware of what's coming around the corner as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. So we finally arrived at the end of this panel discussion. A few takeaways from our panelists would be that in order to progress and remain relevant, we need to have a strategy in place, a business strategy which is well articulated. Everything starts from the board level. We need to have the support and sponsorship from the board and their understanding and appreciation of the importance of adopting technology, AI in the business. We need to have the technology stack, the technology architecture, well designed, well thought through, and that would include removing data silos, thinking about our data strategy. And finally, we want to ensure that we bring everybody along. And in doing so, we need to ensure that everybody has fundamental understanding, foundational knowledge of what AI is. So finally, I would add, perhaps, in order to ensure that all of these three elements come together, we perhaps would need to have a common denominator in adopting this technology in financial services through a set of guidelines and perhaps regulations, which, having spoken with many practitioners from different jurisdictions, they expect this from their regulators. So in this day and age, we know how, we build roads, we eat the food we buy from the shops. All of this have some guidelines behind them. So I think it is acceptable to look at the regulations in adopting of AI in financial services as a reality and something which actually would help us progress. We need innovation, but we also need progress in the way we deliver our services to our clients. So that's all from us today. I hope you enjoy our roundtable. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you all soon, sometime. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.